Hi, and welcome to Yeshiva Shem and Aver. I'm Rabbi David Katz. This week is the Parashas Balak, and it is the article is entitled "The Torat of Hashem in the Eyes of Gerim." Questions, comments, or feedback can be reached at Rabbi Katz at virtualyeshiva.com. All right, the general template, as generally I give over every week. The article was written on Friday on the blog, soulmazel.com, and the article is the extraction or the isolation of the ger in the parsha to gain an objective point of view of the parsha, which then bleeds over into the Haftorah, which I find it highlights the Haftorah very finely, with like a fine edge, to find out what the mochen or intellect is of the Haftorah. Into the Zohar, it blows up into a nice picture. And I find this is effective and it works. And with that said, let's go. There's a concept that was brought down in the Zohar a couple of weeks ago, that there's a world called Olam Hahu. It's like the general term of the spiritual reality, right? We know that in Kabbalah there are different worlds and there's this and that, but imagine if you had the essence of spirituality kind of summarized beyond time and space, beyond worlds, where everything just is. That world's called Olam Hahu. And in that world, it functions as a yeshiva. That yeshiva really is the underlying truth of our reality. We don't know that. We see life as we experience it with border. And we're all in separate universes. Every sector is different. We don't have the technology to unite the sectors of the universe. We're trying with the internet. But at the end of the day, the world is highly compartmentalized. If we saw what was going on, we would understand that we were all in one big yeshiva. And we were here to learn that we're all a ger, Jew and ger alike. We're all gerim, and we're all learning Torah. We're all serving God. When it gets compartmentalized, we lose touch. Everybody forgets that they're a ger. Jew and ger alike. We forget that there's Torah. When I say ger, chances are from this point it's probably going to be both camps. Unless I specify, or unless it's obvious from connotation. But I think like as I said last time, we've moved into a universal framework where the ger is the people of reality. That's everybody that's aware that they are a ger, again, which covers both camps. So stay sharp on the shift. We lose touch with our spiritual mission, our names, the Torah, God. Then you get it, when that breaks down, then you get kind of like a sub-idolatry, the Tower of Babylon syndrome. Our languages are not accurate. We use poor communication. We don't know God with pristine clarity. Hopefully we're still kosher at that point. Otherwise it breaks down and down and down, until ultimately you're locked in a cage and you think you're free. It's when you realize that you're in the cage, that's when you really start to become free. And then the cages unite and it gets a bigger cage. And until there's a society on earth, then there is no cage. Then you're on earth doing the truth, serving God, learning Torah, da-da-da-da. Now, everybody that's enslaved would call that slavery and vice versa. This is why we must know the ultimate reality of what is reality. Are we here to watch Kim Kardashian's baby being born? Or are we here to study Torah and know about God? And ironically, the internet is dominated by both of these topics. And it's that extreme. And somewhere in the middle, there's something called religion. And religion kind of goes and says, well, we're aware of the shtusim in the world, and we're aware of something deeper in Torah in the world, but it's kind of intermixed. The tree of knowledge of good and evil. And in that upper world, the essential world, there's the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the academy. And he teaches Torah kind of like a dispatcher to every organism of reality, of ultimate reality. And this is kind of like bees that make honey that come and return and go with the pollen. This goes on and on and on. Eventually, Torah ideas come down and are generated. And all the ideas that we have during the day are kept in a book. And we go to sleep, we deposit. And the world functions as an organic yeshiva. But this is not the entire world. This is only a portion. Everything really is on a tremendous metaphysical level of the Holy Temple above. And I would say this yeshiva is the operating system inside. And in the end of days, when all the Torah has been learned, the objective has been given, the point of creation has been met, when the temple is ready to be revealed in the world, then you can expect Mashiach to come, and he takes the Rosh Yeshiva, stops being the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the academy. He grabs the essential book scroll of Torah, and he reads from it. And it becomes a crown on his head, and this effectively is the Mashiach. The scroll that he reads is called Parashas HaKahal, the portion of the congregation. This week's Parsha, Parashas Balak, is a remnant of Parashas HaKahal. If there's a similarity of the messianic Parashas HaKahal in our shadow world that resembles the true world, which is the gift of our world, as it resembles the truth, then this week is the week that the Messiah grabs the text and reads. Now, is it going to come into fruition? Is it going to be the year of truth, when it's no longer a role play, but actually comes into divine reality? We can only hope. But that's the dominating headspace of this week's Parsha. And the Kahal, as the Vilna Gaon explains, comes from the term Koheles Yaakov, the congregation of Yaakov. Now, you probably heard of the book of Ecclesiastes. That's the name Kohelet, or in Ashkenazi twang, it's Koheles. And therefore, Jacob is called Koheles Yaakov, the congregation of Jacob. And that congregation consists of priests, Levites, and Israelites. But then that represents the three-headed shin, letter shin. But there's also a four-headed shin, which we've talked about many times. And the fourth leg of the shin are the Gerim. And I actually saw verbatim in the Vilna Gaon that the Gerim are part of this Koheles Yaakov. The congregation of Yaakov is part of Israel. Literally. So now you have an effect that when you go back and read the Torah, because this is essentially the end of the Torah right now, we reach messianic conclusion with Parashas HaKahal. Next week we have Pinchas, who represents the Messiah character. And the book ends with Matos and Messiah, in literary terms, the conclusion. And the book of Bamidbar ends the Torah. Dvarim is just a reiteration of everything. The appendix. Or the glossary of terms, what do we call it, the Mafteach, the index of topics. So you have that this week really is the climax of the entire Torah. And this is why that in these last parshiot, I would say going from Shlach and then onwards to Korach and Chukas, all these last parshas are really the gist, the meat of the whole Torah. Everything comes into focus in these parshas. I thought about it on Shabbos. I think because when the year starts, let's say around Rosh Hashanah, and you're learning the beginning of Bereshis, the end game cannot be there because you're just getting started in the year. And the Torah works with a sort of mazal that you just kind of pick up speed. Around Bereshis, you're just dealing with the holidays, you're getting started, you're going into winter, come Shemos, you're getting into the law issues, you're into the year, come Vayikra, you're really cruising now, and Vayikra generally is thought to be a boring book. It's not, but it's taken as such. By the time you get to Bamidbar, no matter who or where you are, you're ready to rock. You've seen enough things throughout the year, you can start putting the pieces together. The book of Bamidbar comes, and it's the ultimate idea in Kabbalistic literature. No matter what path you take, you always end up with the same outcome. Peace. Shalom. If you get through it. And the trick is to just get through it with a single theme. And this year we did it with the Ger. And what's the theme conclusion? The covenant of peace. Right there it is. Sefer Yetzirah ends that way. The Bahir ends that way. Everything always ends that way. Therefore, the book is, the Torah is a Kabbalistic book, reflecting the Kabbalistic universe. And when looking in retrospect, once you have the entire Torah finished, the Ger comes to light in a whole new way. In this week's Parsha, again, it's the climax, and the Ger takes the center stage of Parshas Kahal. Onward into the Haftorah. The Haftorah mentions, it's brought in the commentary, as it mentions Balak and Bilam's counsel to destroy Israel. The main theme that you can look at when you look at the bigger picture is Parshas HaKahal, the Kehelas Yaakov, the congregation of Yaakov. It talks about the remnant of Yaakov, and there's another concept called Knesset Yisrael, the gathering of Israel. So you have the congregation of Jacob, and you have the congregation of Israel. What this means is that all through the last 2,000 years, of the 2,000 years of Messiah that followed 2,000 years of Torah, which came after 2,000 years of chaos, making 6,000 years of creation. The nation of Israel is turned over generation after generation. And the same characters are always in play at the end game. Ishmael, Esav, Rav, Gerim, Israel, priests, the whole story. Eventually you'll get it right. That's the idea, is creation eventually works out. And on with the congregation and the gathering, you'll have Jews that go off and are lost. You'll have Gerim come in. They'll convert. Some will remain Ger. Whatever the dynamic, there's this kind of bubbling, this constant simmer. And it's the remnant of Jacob. There's all the time, there's people coming on, people coming off, people on the fringe, people out of the fringe. And it's the same characters turning over until it's become right. One of the complaints of Moab, when it says that Moab was afraid, they were afraid of the plunder that was going to come over their land. I just want to say one last point that was before, what's came on my mind. When we get to the end of the Torah in its kind of messianic flavor, it's called Tachlis, the goal of the Torah. The repair, the rectification of the world in the Torah. The rest of the Torah becomes Ger applicable. That when you look over, when you didn't get the Ger story to the end, but when you go back, you'll see the offerings in the book of Vayikra, and the laws of the Ger, let's say in Shemos, and the book of creation, and Genesis, and the meat of the matter, and Bamidbar, the Ger was involved the whole time. That was the point I forgot to mention. And when you get to the end, you've lost touch with the point of the Torah, because it just gets too complicated. There's just too many things going on. And then you go into Devarim, and the book is already over. So when you go into Devarim, you start over and you review, so you weren't confused for that long. But if you hold tight to the end, and you realize that the Ger is, let's say the redemption of the Ger is the meat of the matter, then you can look back and see the whole Torah revolved around the Gerim in law, in creation, in the story, the development, all the way to the climatic conclusion. And we haven't done Devarim yet. We're going to be doing that in a couple weeks, so we'll see how Devarim goes. But as for right now, you can retroactively position how the Ger now comes in many, many laws. When it say, let's say one place it would say Ish, which is man, or friend, or just the Ger, or the pure one. All these terms that the commentaries would say, now this is to include a Zar, somebody not a priest, or whatever language. Now that we understand the Ger is part of the congregation of Jacob, he's a member of Israel. Proper. Okay, just want to mention that point. Back into the Haftorah. The plunder of the nations. There is a plunder of the nations. Israel is coming for your nation, and they are going to plunder. Your fears are justified. Egypt saw it firsthand. Now, why is this fear justified? Why is there plunder? And the answer is, why is Israel in exile in the first place? Why is it okay to teach Torah to the world? Why is anything happening like this? Why is Israel right now encamped by Moab? And the answer is, they are there to find Ruth. Ruth comes from Moab. They're planting their own seeds. But Israel goes into exile to receive Gerim. And it's generally thought Gerim are the converts. Nay. Gerim are the fourth branch of Israel. And it's not a defined branch. Every type of Ger possible. And you have to pretty much go out of your way to be not a Ger. I mean, you have to be adamant. I am not a Ger. I am an idolater. I mean, to turn your back on it it's going against that essential yeshiva that we're talking about. You're against the truth. You're against God. You're against all of it. Okay. But if you're not against it, chances are you are a Ger. On some level. The goal is for everyone to realize that they are. And again, I mean, I want it to be caught on, but it's on both sides. If you're a Jew that lost touch with being a Ger, that's equally bad. Because there are levels of, let's say, evil in the Jewish camp that you might not be what you think you are. So just because you're on one side doesn't make you on, you're going to live out that dream. For example, let's say real estate in Manhattan goes for millions of dollars. And you could say, well, okay, so I'm homeless, but I live in Manhattan. That makes me like one of the people that live here, right? Hey, we're all here in Manhattan, aren't we? Well, no. Not just because you're in the same place and proximity as the truth, let's say, does not make you a citizen. One of the mentionings of the Haftorah is it says, hey, I gave you guys Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And that's the Gematria 897, which I found interesting, which is the same Gematria as the Vilna Gaon points out, Ephraim Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the most essential connotation, explicit name of Mashiach ben Yosef, that when we daven and pray for the redemption, this is this power of ben Yosef, of the repair in the world that gets life vitality. And the point why God gives these three redeemers is to say, I gave you three good prophets that each had a way of prophecy. One I spoke to, one I showed visions, and one I placed the words in his mouth. That would be Aaron. The visions was Miriam, and speaking face to face was Moses, which the Vilna Gaon explains are the three types of prophecy. Now this gematria in turn goes out to be with the value of Babylon spelled out, which is this is the way you bring down Babylon, the revelation of prophecy in the redemption, which is the same value as the verse that says Rishon Letzi in the first to Zion, as a reference to the name of the Messiah. As I said, this parsha is highly messianic. That the vessels of redemption are in the parsha. It lends itself to understanding prophecy through the evil of Balak and Bilam's anti-prophecy. The Messiah action himself, Pinchas, doing the deed of killing Zimri and Cosby. Just everything about what the redemption stands for, this is the light of it in what's called Parshas HaKahal. So there will be plunder when the Gerim come out from the woodwork to join the redemption. The remnant of Yaakov, which the word remnant in its opposite letters is the same value as the truth and that of Moses. This is also reminiscent of Eov. The parsha is reminiscent of Eov. Therefore, the Haftorah says, God says, hey, if you have a complaint, let's hear it. That was Job, for lack of Hebrew. Eov's life story was, why does God mess with people? Why is God... The Moab is saying the same thing. They're saying, why do you put Israel next to us? Israel's saying, why do you bring Midian against us? Everybody has the perfect, tranquil life. And then turmoil happens, and everyone says the same thing. Did you have to rock the boat, God? And that's what the Haftorah is saying. God's saying, hey, tell me what's going on. And the end of the Haftorah, there it says, if you want to know how to know God, are you going to do it like Eov? Do you have to be rich and plentiful, and the world has to be perfect for me to serve God? Or maybe you can serve God with the vessels that you have. And the end of the Haftorah, there are 7 concepts and words. Kindness, mishpat, which is justice, that tells you, as a hint towards the 7 laws, you can serve God anywhere, anyhow, anytime. The Rambam even goes on to say how to learn Kabbalah anywhere, anytime. And this is really the essence of prophecy. The secrets of prophecy are God speaks to everybody. But we live in our little jail cell. And God says, I'm sorry for doing that. If you're the Eov program, please drop me a line. But that means you know that you're a ger, so you have to know the truth and know that you're in a box. And we see it plays out because those that really are in a box think they're not. They're not hearing the voice of God at all. So the whole world is upside down. To get to that olam hahu, you have to flip the world around to get into that real reality. To the point where eventually, when the redemption comes, the word of God will be clear in the world. As it says in the Zohar, Moses was able to understand the prophecy whatever he wanted by understanding the combinations of letters and vowels the same way as Bezalel built the Mishkan tabernacle. Now Moses was the master of Hebrew. He was a master of everything when it came to the prophecy. So he could understand, God spoke to him this way. And he could do whatever he wanted to. Now, we don't have the vessels of Moses to be masters of Hebrew to the extent Moses was able to write the Torah. But the more we work through our study and wisdom, the Word of God becomes clear, even if it comes through klippa and layers. Eventually, the redemption is the return of the prophetic voice of God. And that will come. That we, no matter filtered down, but no matter where we are, who we are, what we've been through, you can serve God wherever you are. You don't have to have the ideal conditions. Now, the ideal condition would say, okay, it doesn't really matter what religion, let's say, but I have to be born of a perfect religious household. They'll teach me Hebrew and all the Kabbalistic secrets. That's how people would want their mazal to be. But the real secret of mazal is it doesn't matter what your blessing is, where you were born into. There's no karma. Everybody is equally distant or close to whatever it is that they're destined to be. We all have the ability given. Laws, no matter what the laws are accessible and made available and are spoken to us in our inferno. We are in a cage, but that cage speaks. And when we realize that the cage is not a cage, it's just lips that are all speaking at the same time. Surrounded by mouths, people speaking at us creates the image of a bubble, of a border, of a cell. When we begin to interact with that bubble, and it's no longer a bubble, it's people interacting, it's worlds together, then you begin to listen and understand what God wants of you. But that cooperation only comes under the jurisdiction of the truth. Everyone's a ger, everyone's in a yeshiva, God runs the universe. Once these ground rules are set and you exist in a community of people that believe the same way, and this is not about, your beliefs are wrong, mine are right. Because again, one person believes by name might not be how he feels in his heart. He doesn't have the words to express. Because we're all locked out of the true world. We're not in that spiritual world openly where we can say, hey, come with me, I know the truth. Therefore, there must be a blending of terms and universes and cooperation of friendship. This parsha is a representation of the parsha of the Kehillah, of the congregation. We can learn infinite lessons of how the congregation works. But we're seeing it in the negative. And that negative comes from Bilam and Balak. But what we can learn from what their evil creates, the white parchment around the ink of the Torah, that we can begin to fathom what the congregation really looks like. And that's going to go down as the blessings of Bilam. He has to bless Israel. The Zohar, on the other hand, explains what witchcraft is. And I found this extremely interesting. The Kabbalah universe is the Ger. It's like the 7 lower Sfirot, 7 laws. The upper 3 Sfirot are called Gimel Rishonim, which stands for the upper 3 initial letter spells Ger. That the vessels of the Ger universe lends itself as the Kabbalistic true universe, Olamahu, that world. Now the left side, which is generally called the other side, the evil side, it comes out that the world's not inherently evil because the left side is missing a certain level of function. That's a chisaron, a lack in the world. Our job as a society is to repair this condition of a leakage of evil into the world, and we need to build up the level of God's kingdom. In a nutshell, that creates a gray area. There's an area that is Kabbalistically cloaked, and Mashiach dwells in that area, which is called the bird's nest, the Kan Sipur. And it's unknown, unseen. It's the level of Bina, or understanding. Now, because it's cloaked, and Mashiach learns Torah there, what comes out of that level is a great exploitation. And the evil side has access to this domain. It's kind of like the well that keeps giving if you go there. It's the impure side of the equation. But generally, people just don't go there. To go there, you have to be evil, because it exists in the pathways of the Torah, of the perversion. And the perversion is acute. Really, really acute. And again, like we were saying about evil, you would have to be 100% evil to go there. But when you do, that's where the powers of witchcraft come into the world. That's the deception that goes on. It's the evil in the world. Then Balak and Bilam, that's where their nest was. This is why Balak was called the son of Tzipor, the son of the bird. They drew their powers from there. And what the theme of the Zohar Parsha is let's say the Ger universe. And I said Ger here meaning the non-Jewish universe. That there's a Torah there, there's a Kabbalah there, there's just like anything in the world, there's a good and a bad. And the Zohar explains that Balak and Bilam, they were perverting from there. But again, David also, Mashiach and David is there, and out of that is where Ruth comes from. So in the Parsha, you actually find out, it goes into what is the story with Ruth. And I actually saw it written in clear terms. When Ruth married in the land of Moab to Machlon and Kilian, the sons of Elimelech, or what was it, Elimelech thing? They were not Jewish, Ruth and Orpah. And it was only afterwards with Naomi, much, much later, when she said, my people are your people, my God is your God. Just right around the time of Boaz is when she made the ascension to, let's say, be able to elicit a Jewish child. May she pushed the envelope as far as it goes. But there was no, let's say, ritual conversion. She took the Torah to its fullest extent. She literally achieved everything that you can achieve. So that was written in how she comes from Eglon, in the episode of our Parsha of the fields of Moab. So what you find in the Zohar is that the explanations of the Torah, for better or for worse, it comes from the illumination of the Ger, the Torah's mysteries, how the world works, really what the power to destroy the cage, and how the cage comes into play, how the powers of evil manipulate the cage. Once you know that there's such a power, you can defend yourself from the cage. And that's the idea of a bird. The bird is placed in a cage. More than probably, any normal depiction of a pet. And there's a natural product of reality, and what the evil forces do is they say, if there's already this property, let's just exploit the property. Just paint the cage a color, and then they'll buy into their cage. They'll put pictures up in their cage. We'll sell them pictures. We'll tell them how good their cage is. Cages can talk on the phone. But when you know how the world works from the real essence of the Ger, then you'll realize the cage is not what evil tells you it is. It's a predicament of reality. And that out of that reality comes the true revelation of Torah, God, the universe, spirituality. The spiritual technology, you don't need evil. Evil will then crumple up and go away. It's called talking, communicating, interacting, by the tools of God's creation. No need for exploitation. And when you go back over the entire Torah and you isolate the ger, again, universally, starting with Bereshis, you start to see how the world was meant to work and how it ultimately does work. If you turn on let's say the opposite of exploitation, you start going in pathways that are drawn up by God. That's how the yeshiva comes to operate. That's how God's name becomes known. It's not traveling on pathways, certainly not of the evil pathways, and certainly not of the exploited pathways, but a new order of society that's built on the pathways of Torah, not the New World Order that they speak about on YouTube. We're talking about the laws of the Torah and the pathways of the Torah, how interaction is supposed to work. And the essence of those pathways are Pinchas. When Zimri and Cosby are getting together, the Israelite and the Midianite woman, Pinchas spears them. That's a pathway unbeknownst to anybody until that time. And that was such a powerful action, it literally made peace in the world. That was a prophecy that was brought down to Pinchas in his name by God calling his name. So imagine a society of, let's say, prophetically inspired, of God calling our names and us cooperating in a society that's driven by one's name as God calls you by. What evil does, they say you have no name. You're a number. If that. I tell you what you go for. The Parashas the Kahal says we are a congregation. The world is a civilization. And there really is a congregation of Gerim amongst the whole world. What evil has done is it paints a different picture and says, y'all are in jail. But the Torah says that's not a jail. Those are heichalot, chambers of righteousness. And it's a battle of perspective. Evil draws from a place of robbery, stealing the Torah from Ben David and calling it under the guise of something else. When we start to bring the Torah as a dynamic organism in our lifestyles, a pulsating, breathing entity, eventually there will be a redemption. Evil will be eradicated. And everyone's universe will be illuminated with the light of God. Zohar goes on to explain how the yeshiva of the essential ger operates. How the worlds function together all the time. And that when one, God forbid, has a bad teaching, let's say, evil gets into the equation, bad code, then the one who gives over that teaching has an accuser, a satan, against him. This is the vision of Joshua the high priest in the books of the prophets, as he stood before the angel. And what happens is, when you in the parsha, our parsha, it uses the word of a shore, of an ox. And what it is that in judgment, it looks like an ox, the accuser. This is the secret of the golden calf. That what they did was they brought down the teaching of a lesser yeshiva, not of the world Olam Ahu. And they said, here's the Rosh Yeshiva. And it wasn't. It's the same power of the four that entered the Pardes. One went crazy, one died, one became a heretic, and Rabbi Akiva lived. And the one that became a heretic saw a lesser entity. So they brought down at the golden calf that lesser entity and said, here's the world. No, that's the world of the Satan. Literally. So you have the Ger universe illuminates everything in Torah that's a mystery. Why was there a golden calf? What is the repair of Adam? What are the secrets of the universe? How does the world work? The Torah is built around this. This is the operating system. If there's going to be a repair of man in the world, the ger and his vessels are it. The Vilna Gaon even says that they are the B'nai Navim. The prophet is inspired by what's called Ishim, by men. The men of truth are who inhabited Jerusalem. Anybody who is under the premise of ger has the ability to inspire prophecy. That's how the prophets had their prophecy. The Gerim were the inspiration. They speak matters and words of Torah by nature. Thus, prophecy is inspired. The vision is derived from the ger. So we see that the history of spirituality, the Torah in its conclusion, and from cover to cover, the ger and Israel are brothers intertwined to the point there is no such thing as one devoid of the other. It's one nation of Israel with four extensions of the Shin. It's one Kehelis Yaakov. And every member of that four-headed Shin, whether the priest, the Levite, the Israelite, or the ger, has a function. Just like the four craftsmen, the king, the judge, the prophet, and the priest. Everybody has a role. This Parsha, there's the role of everybody. Evil's at its finest. The Messiah is there to be victorious. Gerim are the head wave of the whole Parsha. Moses is there. The nations are there. Everybody's present. And the second verse of the Parsha begins. Moab was very afraid. Lashon language, ger. The Midrash says, what were they afraid of? They were afraid of the plunder. They were afraid of losing their land. They were afraid of the conspiracy. They were afraid of the nation of Israel, so they want to attack Israel to get back at Hashem. They intermingled. Moab moved in with the Jews in Moab. They were there a long time, getting to know the nature of what was going on. This was the first exile after Egypt. This is Egypt all over again. It explains Egypt, why the Egyptians were afraid. What happened in Goshen, how the Jews and the Egyptians were living together. The very first Rashi of the Torah explains this concept. Why does the Torah start Bereshis bara Elokim? To say that the nations one day are going to say to Israel, the land of Israel is not yours. And that's what's dominating the headlines today. Nothing changes here. Moab is scared to death. And there is going to be a plunder, and the fear is justified. Because the nation of Israel is encamped there looking for Gerim. They don't even know it, but that's what they're doing. There's going to be a Ruth one day. At this time in history, nothing bad had yet happened. Whenever there was a spy, there were episodes, but right now, for all intents and purposes, the desert is not that bad. And they're going to encamp for a long time next to Moab. The real existence hasn't been threatened yet. This is where Balak and Bilam begin. Midian's going to join with Moab. Bilam is called. Together, this is the power of Amalek of the highest order, is represented by the names of Bilam and Balak. And from the vessel of the ger, the fear version of the word ger. Ger means fear. Then you can begin to connect the dots into a vision of the whole parsha. Bilam's going to offer 7 sacrifices in place of the 7 laws. This is about the eradication of the laws. Israel, the power of their mouth led by Moses, if they know what they're doing, they're going to give over the Torah for the Gerim. As the Torah contains all levels of 7 wisdoms embedded in the Torah. Whereas Balak and Bilam want to eradicate the God part of the equation and just go with wisdom. The Noahide law is what's going to bring Ruth back. The Torah of the Ger is what brings Ruth out of Moab. The battle is on between Moses and Bilam. Moses has the word of God coming to his mouth. He can actually learn the word of God in anything in creation by doing name analysis. Basically, changing vowels, understanding levels, and seeing how everything is a message from God. And he's lightning quick, so it becomes real-time conversation. To the point that it's even audible. Bilam's the opposite. Bilam guesses. Bilam watches Mazel unfold. But he's missing the essential piece every time. So he's looking with an evil eye. That's why Bilam is depicted as having one eyeball. As the other eye is that place of impurity, that place of where witchcraft dwells. Manipulation, lashon hara, guessing, ignorance. Bilam's job is to gaze upon Israel and find the evil. Exploitation, find what they do wrong. What's their secret? It comes in their mouth. What are they talking about? And the answer is nothing. They're not talking about anything. In fact, Bilam is so distraught by this, he has to bless the nation of Israel. Because they're not. This is the Eov program before motivated from something negative. Balak and Bilam would go around gazing upon the nation, seeking to find that nasty thing. They would never find it. Again, this is Eov or Job before the trials. But there will be trials. As eventually Balak and Bilam will realize the Midianite women will be the Eov program when Israel starts to fret. That's just before they throw in the towel. They quit, Balak and Bilam. They're ready to stop. They found nothing to antagonize Israel. In fact, quite the opposite. They find out that Israel has a brother, the Ger. Bilam's blessings are predicated on the Ger. The 10 tribes, as seen as the Kenites, Kan Sippor, relationship to redemption, the men of peace and truth of Jerusalem, all mentioned in Bilam's blessings. In fact, Bilam is jealous himself and he wants to kind of be a Ger, he says. He wants to die the death of the righteous. The relationship is clear as ever between the Jew and the Ger by the eyes of Balak and Bilam. And by watching the Mazal unfold, Balak and Bilam have manifest in front of them something that they saw as a potential weakness. Every brotherhood of the Torah was faulty. Brotherhood is a recipe of disaster. Just look at Cain and Abel, Abraham and Lot, Ishmael and Esav, the tribes, Japheth and Shem. Bilam understands this is the gift of God given to him. Make the brotherhood erupt. The brotherhood will erupt. As Bilam is watching the golden calf materialize before him, Hashem is actually drawing out the path of the eternal redemption. What Bilam saw, though, is that the men were not interested in Moabites. The Moabite women, on the other hand, they were interested in Moabite men. This was what led to the creation of the Ger Tzedek along the lines of Eglon, the king of Moab, where Ruth eventually will come from. So that did serve its purpose. That was an accident of the close proximity of the weakness of the mouth of Israel talking. But the men didn't buy it until the Midianite women came into the scene. Now Bilam understands God's mazal unfolding. The Midianite women will get to the men of Israel. And there's a special law in the Torah where Pinchas is a part of. When you have foreign women under certain circumstances, they can become a type of ger, not through conversion, even to the priesthood. She is to be given as a wife. Today, the Jewish law does not go this way, but in history, it has happened. And if you can introduce this circumstance to the nation, and nobody has an answer, the Torah will unravel at the seams. You'll go back to chaos and void. If there's a node of destruction, one nuclear bomb to throw, this is the bomb. In the guise of a Midianite woman onto Israel. And Zimri and Cosby go for it, and creation is unraveling at the seams. Imagine if you were to take how the creation of Christianity was a threat to holiness. Well, man, this is the threat of all threats. This is idolatry of all idolatry. Every evil is in this node. And it's as inconspicuous as hanging out. That's where Pinchas erupts. Pinchas sees what's going on. If there's going to be a tikkun, a rectification in the Torah, if the Torah is building up to a climax, there's a redemption. It all boils down to something. This is the moment. In fact, the Arizal explains how Pinchas merited the ways and the light of the Messiah. He becomes the inheritor of Mashiach and Yosef, Mashiach and David, and the level above of Moshe, Nishmat Moshe, the soul of Moses. The Torah is a book written outside the land of Israel. It's a book of Gerim. It's a book of trying to find Zion, to the point that it's written about Zion when God will choose the place he will choose. But there must be the light of redemption in the book. There must be that Eov moment of revelation. And the revelation comes when Pinchas recognizes the node of evil. His name is called, to the point it's called Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. When God says, I've known you by name, he stands up and Nadav and Avihu died with an alien fire, 2 priests earlier in the book of Vayikra. Pinchas' name is to repair their sin. Their sin was in the lack of reproduction, which is what this threat posed against the world. Evil reproduction. What Nadav and Avihu did was destructive, but if that same fractal is implemented, it brings down society in the world. Unravels the Torah. Pinchas inherits them and through reincarnation by performing the action of its repair. And his name, Pin and Chas, corresponds to Nadav and Avihu. Pinchas repairs the breach on every level, brings peace in the world, messianic intent. He acts from prophecy, hearing his name called by God, restores order in the universe. And in that moment, Pinchas understands the DNA code of the Ger and Torah. Zimri and Cosby reflected, let's say, the perversion of the greatness of the Ger. Pinchas understands and restores the order. He even goes on to sanctify this by marrying the daughter of Joshua and Rachav. Rachav being a Ger Tzedek. Pinchas' action was foretold by Bilam and Balak. Bilam already prophesied there's going to be a problem and there's going to be a messianic revival. But it never happened. And then he saw Midian and he was watching and thinking, is there really going to be a Messiah? Lo and behold, Pinchas stands up and there he is. Pinchas eventually kills Bilam. And this is going to be told out now over the next X amount of years, thousands of years. The messianic repair of Pinchas will be played out. Bilam's prophecy will be played out. In the end, the Parashas Kahal explains the tyranny of evil. It explains the white parchment between the ink of the Torah, the place where God exists, where the angelic movement exists, spirituality. Bilam was accused by the Satan by riding on top of the donkey and the angel with a drawn sword. There's a lot of things going on in our reality. A lot of that spiritual world, we're not aware of it when we sleep, when we walk, hidden miracles. In that entire universe of spirituality that we don't know, that's the world of the Ger. When one realizes he's a Ger, he's in touch with that universe. He has the power to eradicate evil, bring Chedushim into the world, inspire even prophecy. Aware of angelic intersection, aware of God in the creation, Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, Mazal, looking at the true good eye of creation, staying away from impurity. That's what this Parashas Kahal represents. The close proximity of Mashiach and the Gerim. As Pinchas is alone, where's Pinchas even come from? He's in his own world, and all of a sudden he stands up, gets the message, and kills. The whole thing was brought about, and then there was Balak and Bilam watching you. Big brothers watching you. We didn't even know. If there's one bubble of reality in the Torah, of 6,000 years of Torah creation being told, a messianic conclusion, all of Torah built in a progression to understand what's going on here, every character involved, from holiness to impurity to Amalek, to the Kehelas Yaakov, to exile and redemption. The secret of Pinchas at the end, and how he repairs the universe, which began only in light of the fear of Moab of the concept of being afraid of Gerim. That was their fear. That was the attack. And that was also the salvation. Pinchas acts and he gets the Gilgal, the reincarnation, which gives him and allows him the power to repair the Tikkun Adam, the repair of Adam, the whole entire Torah. That repair is the covenant of peace. And that's the conclusion of every word of Torah. Peace. Which began, the whole story began when Shem broke away from Babylon, met up with Abraham, and prophetically it was told between Melchizedek and Abraham there will be a Jerusalem and bounty coming down onto Zion. A complete redemption. Abraham called it Yira and awe. Shem called it peace, Shalom, Yerushalayim. That was the beginning of the Ger. That is when Shem gave over the Torah of Noah, the primordial Eov, and gave Abraham the ways of God, which became, let's say, the most truthful religion to mankind. Before it was perverted, the anti-Babylon. That was where the Ger started. And it comes into high focus by Parashas Balak. When Pinchas stood in the fire and acted. That action was so strong, the actual Mashiach ben David does come from that. As in that field at that time, past, present, and future collide, and there are Ruth, the seeds were sown of Ruth. Ruth will come of this episode. And Ruth explains from the story of Ruth, as we find in the Zohar, all pathways of the Torah are made accessible through Ruth. The study of such